Greetings, humans.
Welcome to another episode of Humans of the Multiverse, where we share the stories of our friends from all over the globe.
We hope you find this conversation interesting and uplifting. Our goal is to bring people together, so if you enjoy the interview, we'd love to hear your comments.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. This week, we have an absolute banger of an episode featuring independent researcher and author, Mr. R.N. Vooght. Rick has investigated the connections and similarities between the cosmologies of many civilizations, both ancient and modern.
In our discussion, we also examine similarities between the shapes of constellations and neurotransmitter molecules. We consider what this means for our understanding of the human story and even reality itself, just as the age-old idea, as above, so below.
Yeah, so this is super cool to have you on the show. Is it RN? Do we call you Richard? On the Perceptions Today podcast, they were doing a little bit of both.
Rick's fine. Rick
is fine.
Welcome, Rick. So. It's good to meet you.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to speak to you guys, and thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. I mean, we're both familiar with your book, and we both listened to the Perceptions Today podcast. You're also a master pun maker, apparently. So that's been fun. That was me, by the way, that you were going back and forth with on the puns, but I'm totally outmatched in that department, apparently.
Yeah, as serious as some of this research can be, it's always nice to just sprinkle a little bit of humor and fun in it. You know, it's all too easy to run away and be far too serious about some of these things. But yeah, it just makes it a little bit more enjoyable, a little bit more easy to digest, if you know what I mean.
I do. Yeah, I do. Speaking of that, I guess I'll hit you with a question right out the gate. Some people do take this kind of research that you do in alternative history, alternative archaeology, very seriously. And you know, people like Graham Hancock get called racist for stuff like this. You know, have you run into anything like that in your like any pushback culturally?
Not so much. I mean, I won't name names, but there's a number of, I guess, up and coming, or I guess, what's the word? Podcasters that like to, I guess, I prefer to agree to kind of disagree with them, if you know what I mean. We've kind of had a few tete-a-tetes, come to loggerheads and bits and pieces after following each other, and I guess falling out for one reason or another. But it is what it is. Like I say to most people on the podcasts and people that I just generally talk about when this stuff comes up just in life, you know, you can run with it, you can run away with it. I'm happy either way, you know.
Yeah. You think it's okay and even important to have some disagreements as part of a healthy dialogue, healthy discourse?
100%. I mean, in fairness, I've had disagreements with other researchers that, for want of a better description, it's kind of led me down a different rabbit hole or a different angle or perspective to look at an argument, if you know what I mean. It's nice to kind of climb out of the environment and kind of take a bigger scope of a picture. And I've had some quite strong opinions about things that have been changed, you know. I'm not saying that I'm the be all and end all with regards to the research that I'm putting out there. Although I will say I will fully defend, back up and justify my arguments. But unfortunately, there's a number of researchers out there that would rather start slinging the proverbial shit, if you know what I mean. But I just don't really like to get into it. It's a shame that we can't all really kind of band together, you know. We've got people like you say, Graham Hancock, getting kind of vilified from the archaeological industry and those surrounding it for no untoward reason, really. And like Graham says, he's not going to be right on a lot of things. But to quote Graham as well, why throw out the baby with the bathwater? You know, let's put all I guess, eggs into one basket together and kind of mix it up a little bit to make the proverbial omelette. You know, there's a recipe there somewhere, and I think everyone's got a certain ingredient to add. Whether it's going to make the perfect, the perfect answer, who knows? But
That's right, because all the good questions, the questions that are fun to ask and fun to ponder, that we're trying to figure out, there's no definitive answers. It's very hard to be provably right about things that happened in the remote past, but who really cares about stuff from a short time ago that's well documented? That's not the history that I'm interested in. I want to know
no,
what's hard to
absolutely.
know. So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, in fairness, it's I kind of pinch myself sometimes. I'm hoping to get this next book out, hopefully by summer solstice. That's the big plan, part 4 of this current ongoing trilogy, whereby, crikey, in 2017 I released the Spirit in the Sky, Ancient Cosmological Gods and Where in the World We Find Them, this bad boy here. And I was kind of thinking that it was going to be a bit of a mic drop moment. That's my stuff. I'm going to kind of enter the arena, leave it alone, and see what materialise or is forthcoming or not there on in. But if someone had said to me sort of 10 years ago that I'd be penning my sort of 5th and 6th books consecutively, I would have probably laughed, you know, especially some of the directions the particular research has taken me in, because I've always been fascinated with ancient cosmologies, the work of obviously the Hancocks of the world, the Laird Scrantons of the world, fingerprints of the gods, and these Dogon cosmologies and Enigma that just seems to blow your mind, you know. And you find out the ancients were not, I guess, as technologically advanced as we are today, as we sort of see technology. But I certainly don't believe they were the hunter-gatherer mentality sort of 5, 10, even 12,000 or so years ago, to which archaeology is kind of remaining rather steadfast in, you know, because there's a lot of stuff that we seem to be uncovering today that in some cases are almost ahead of sort of 21st century science. We're kind of playing a little bit of catch up, you know. And yeah, who knows where this is going to take us? Who knows?
Let me do a little phase shift here. You didn't expect to be writing your 5th and 6th books simultaneously, but you also didn't expect to be writing your first book. Can you tell us the story of how you finally found the time to write down all the ideas in your first book?
Yeah, absolutely. You've probably heard me say on the Perceptions podcast and bits and pieces before, but it was kind of it kind of fell into my lap as a turn of ill fate, I guess, that I kind of flipped on its head and kind of made it work for me. I still work in the security industry, but I was working for ESA Astrium, for the European Space Agency, overseeing the construction of Ariane 5 spacecraft in both the UK and south of France.
So you were providing security for that, or?
I'm sorry?
You were providing security for the construction?
Yeah, that's correct. There's a lot of kind of top secret access and bits and pieces to certain spacecraft with regards to sort of government contracts and things. And yeah, it was kind of the greatest job that I think I've ever had. I absolutely loved it. It was fantastic.
Awesome.
And I found myself being flown out to French Guiana to oversee the launch of one particular payload. Excuse me, from the South American jungle. And it was during sort of the night shifts whereby I would be working kind of 12 hours, and most of the guys would be downloading movies or playing games and bits and pieces. But I was quite fortunate with some of the gentlemen that I was working with, whereby 9 times out of 10 would just kind of play cards and just kind of talk about life, you know. And that's where a lot of my conversations and, I guess, material came from the original book, The Spirit in the Sky. But the guys would say to me, look, man, this is so profound. This is crazy stuff. You know, have you ever thought about writing a book? I'm like, well, where am I going to kind of find the time? I'm not really going to do it sort of sitting amongst you guys playing cards and this, that, and the other. Do you know what I mean? Sitting in the American jungle. And I just never thought I was going to find time for it to really materialize and happen until, I lost my footing in the jungle on one of these particular launches, and I fell from some stairwells, and I shattered my back and was flown out of the jungle within sort of 48 hours. And it was realistically, I had two failed surgeries on my back. I then went private for kind of a third and fourth opinion, and they told me that if I didn't have my back fused, literally like within the next handful of weeks, there was going to be a chance that my back and spine was going to deteriorate so much that there was going to be potential that I was basically going to be wheelchair bound for the rest of my life. So I kind of bit the bullet, went for the surgery, and it was a long and hard road, admittedly. It's kind of learning to walk again in bits and pieces. Excuse me. And yeah, that's kind of where I found the time to pen The Spirit in the Sky and put this first book out there. And yeah, I'm glad that I did. I'm really glad that I did. My editor said to me, I say my editor, he's a long-time friend of mine. And yeah, he said to me, where do you want this to go? What's kind of the end game for this? He said, obviously the book's fascinating. I can't wait for the world to kind of find out what you're talking about in bits and pieces. But what do you want to get out of it? And I said, look, at the end of the day, everyone kind of wants to change the world. And if I can change the world for just one person with this information, then I'm going to, just feel sort of uplifted, feel sort of gratified for what I've done. Mm-hmm. But in fairness, I said, look, I've got there's the granddaddy or the heavyweight hitter of alternate research, Graham Hancock. I would love this to kind of hit Mr. Hancock's radar at some point, and maybe be recognised for the work I'm sort of bringing to the party. And he said, well, that's kind of a long shot because Author of the Month only happens once a month. There's only 12 months in a year, and man, there's a lot of books published. Yep. So let's hope and see where we go. And lo and behold, sort of 2 months later, I was contacted by Team Hancock that had found my work, and they said that they'd like to promote it. Wow. And put me out there as Author of the Month in 2017, and I'm just been eternally grateful, really.
That's amazing. That I when I saw you on there, that was one of the first questions I wanted to ask was, how did you get to be featured on Graham Hancock's website? So if you're on Graham Hancock's website, then that means that we're 2 degrees of separation from Graham Hancock. And then if Graham Hancock is friends with Joe Rogan, then you're 2 degrees of separation from Joe Rogan, and we're 3 degrees of separation from Joe Rogan.
There we go. And that's the next kind of level up. That's the next mission, It's we all know how fascinated Mr. Rogan can be, or animated he can be regarding DMT and ancient alternative history. So that's kind of what I'm manifesting and putting out there at the moment. And I'm hoping to introduce that audience to what we're discovering.
I saw and commented on some like call to act, people asking Rogan to look at your work. So I'm hoping that happens because that would be super cool for you, because it'd just be a manifestation of like, what you said that day when he asked you, where do you want this to go? Right. It'd be like, well, let's take it to the top. Right.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I guess that's the main goal that I've got at the moment with regards to telling kind of the world and his wife what we're up to, and where this research starts, where the middle is, and who knows where the end is at the moment. Because as I say, I thought the first book was going to be kind of a mic drop, walk away. There's my piece. That's going to be it. But then obviously deities, myth, and tryptamines was kind of spawned out of different rabbit holes I was kind of deep diving in from the continued research. But again, there was, in fairness, it was conversations with not so much other researchers, but people that had read The Spirit in the Sky that were coming to me and saying, I like what you bring into the party, but maybe you want to look a little deeper because certain things don't kind of marry up. And I'll get to this like a little bit later on in our conversation. But they kind of not forcefully, but comfortably pushed me in the right direction with regards to expanding this particular hypothesis in different directions that I didn't even know was possible, Yeah, before I knew what was going on, Deities, Myth and Tryptamines was published. And again, thank you, Mr. Hancock, for publishing that as well on the website. And yeah, the spirit in this, excuse me, the last one that I published, Searching for Osiris and the Tree of Life, was fortunate enough again to make the author of the month on Graham Hancock's website a couple of years ago as well. So again, shout out Graham. Thank you very much for the continued support, my friend.
Totally. I think Graham Hancock has been sort of most of us either involved in researching or doing anything in this space is introductory. It was for me anyway. Where were you? What were you like? Where were you when you first picked up Graham Hancock's book? In the was it in the 90s you first read it? Like, how did that change your view? Like, what was your view before versus after of human history?
Yeah, that's a great question. Crikey, I wish for all intents and purposes that I found Graham's work literally 6 months prior to when I did, because I was actually 6 months prior to me finding Graham's work. I found myself in Tiwanaku climbing the Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon. And yeah, I found the entire complex just completely fascinating. I really couldn't work out the logistics of how they built this, why they'd built it. And yeah, there's always more questions than answers, if you know what I mean. But it was coming back from I guess it was about a year and a half, 18 months worth of world travel that I found myself in Tiwanaku. Teotihuacan. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine saying that obviously I've climbed these pyramids, X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, dude, have you read Fingerprints of the Gods? And this was probably in 1996, maybe 97. So it only been published a year or two prior. And in absolute fairness, when I was given the tome that it is, I was thinking, dude, man, I'm a busy guy. How am I going to get through this? And yeah, I'm glad that it didn't scare me off too much, because in fairness, I probably read that inside out, cover to cover, 2 or 3 times within about a month. And yeah, I guess the rest is history or prehistory, you might want to say.
Yeah, it changes everything.
That would be a great book to have working security on night shift, when there's no shame in probably getting an hour or 2 in each night. Once you checked your patrols, you're going to have an hour or 2 to sink into that, you know?
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm constantly picking up a number of his books and just kind of refreshing my own knowledge. You know, I mean, I read so many books a year that, I mean, it's quite a sparse library behind me at the moment, but thank God my parents have got a loft and they're willing to kind of cater for all my purchases in the past. And yeah, I'd say every day's a school day. You know, there's so much material out there, conflicting material. You kind of got to separate the wheat from the chaff and try and make what you can of some of these things. You know.
Separating the wheat from the chaff. I really like what you said a moment ago about you refined your take on the research in between your first and second books. You refined your conclusions on that. Graham does the same thing. And those are the authors I tend to like. I want to be able to see some progression over their authorship to say, oh, they thought this at first. They did more research and found more out. And they're not ashamed to say, we've got better ideas, better hypotheses now. An author who comes out at the beginning and says, I already know everything, let me give you 10 books about how I know everything, I'm not interested, you know?
No, exactly. You can't negate decent information when it arrives, even if it conflicts with your own ideas, you know. You've got to be kind of blind and, yeah, a little bit stubborn, kind of cutting your nose to spite your own face, if you know what I mean, because you're not going to get much further down the path of progression and finding out what these ancient cultures may or may not have been up to. But at the moment, it seems they were in possession of some extremely profound information that we're only kind of starting to rediscover today in 2025.
Yeah, which is exciting. There's it seems like every year there's more research, more books, more people expanding upon that idea. Going into your book, Spirit in the Sky, you chose a narrative storytelling that kind of weaves in academic inquiry was that like a difficult line to balance?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt. It's a great question as well. Great observation, to be fair. Again, sort of taking myself back to these clean rooms in French Guiana or Toulouse in the south of France. If someone had said to me that I'd be studying kind of neurochemistry, touching in the realm of quantum theories, and psychedelic chemical compounds hardwired to the human brain, I'd be like, damn, I can't spell half of these words. What are you talking about? You know? But yeah, here we are. And I guess, like I say, every day's a school day, you know. I'm constantly learning. And as I say, it's I'm not always right, and I'm quite happy putting my hands up, you know, to say, look, I've got that one wrong, no problem. But kind of, let's move the goalposts and head in the right direction, you know, which makes it extremely fascinating. It really does.
And I think that there's room to, like, you know, balance those two, and, you know, balance what it seems you're trying to do, like mythology and archaeology, and they go hand in hand if you balance them correctly.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, a mythology is, it's, for want of a better description, it's the way, it's kind of storytelling, like a hero's journey, you know. And either, I'm not saying that a number of mythological, loose air quotes, characters or idols or heroes didn't exist, but I'm starting to believe that a lot of my research now with regards to some of these mythological figures, I think that there's a heck of a lot of allegory with regards to reading between the proverbial lines, whereby, again, touching on the neurology side of things, the scientific side of things, if you want to kind of a story or a narrative that's going to stand the test of time, especially prior to the written word as well, you know, it's going to be very, very easy to forget the gray matter and anatomy and physiology of the human makeup, I guess, you know, whereby if you stitch together a number of stories and a hero's journey, like the myth of Osiris and what have you, it's a lot easier to pass, whether it's by word of mouth or the written word, for it to remain in a culture's zeitgeist, really, for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. And it's absolutely fascinating. And yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of, looking into some of those mythologies with you guys today. It's going to be good fun.
If we want to get into it, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Absolutely. So, with regards to the myth of Osiris, and I would just bring up the very front cover of the book there, where we have the macrocosmic iconology of Orion, also forever immortalized as Osiris, and it's alongside the molecular structure of what we know as one of the world's most illicit chemical compounds, which we produce in the human brain, eyes, lungs, and spinal fluid, and nobody really knows why. But again, DMT was never on my radar. It was only until I had come across, excuse me, around 2010, I guess, 2011 maybe. Again, it was working in another clean room where a guy said to me, "Look, dude, you've got to check out this documentary, the Spirit Molecule, narrated by the mighty powerful Joe Rogan and Dr. Rick Strassman." Mm-hmm. Excuse me, who in the 90s, I'm sure you guys are aware. He was the guy that kind of brought to the fore the first human experimentations to be documented with regards to what the psychedelic / hallucinogenic / multi-dimensional possibilities of this mind-blowing chemical compound that we find littered throughout nature and, as I say, within the human body, what it's all about. And it was never ever on my radar. As I say, I've said this to people on other podcasts. I'm 49 years of age now, and I was privy to kind of growing up in in the rave culture in the 90s in the UK, and there weren't many chemical or psychological compounds that I wasn't privy to with regards to some of the parties that I was frequenting. And yeah, just DMT was never there, you know. But
I grew up in that. I grew up in the 90s too, and I feel like we were using those substances at the wrong places at the wrong times. Like a rave is the last place you want to be, you know, on LSD or something like that, right?
oh no, absolutely, absolutely. MDMA, ecstasy, that's kind of your dance hall, kind of everyone's in love, the music's great, there's no problems here, you're not going to find any violence like the other clubs where people are just drinking, not really thinking, and kind of throwing verbal assaults, if not fists at each other and what have you. And yeah, I'm sure there was a few problems at raves and such throughout the 90s, but none that I really witnessed myself, because kind of, yeah, the 90s was that sort of proverbial revisiting of the summer of love from the 60s and 70s, when these initial psychedelic chemical compounds were banned under certain administrations in America, kind of just say no. But yeah, here we are in the 21st century, kind of reliving this psychedelic renaissance, I guess. And the only frustrating thing that it's extremely, I'm going to be careful with what I do say, but it just makes you wonder where we would be right now if these psychedelic chemical compounds that are hardwired to the human experience weren't so vilified for the past sort of 30 or 40, maybe even 50 years or so now. Yeah, I think that science and medicine and human consciousness would have moved literally giant strides, as opposed to sort of tiptoeing across the threshold of understanding what they may or may not be about, you know?
You did a very good job of saying that carefully, because what you're implying is just simply the question, what if we had been going forward the whole time instead of backwards half of the time?
Absolutely. But again, it's going back in time in history, or even prehistory, that some of these chemical compounds, especially N,N-dimethyltryptamine, appear to be extremely prevalent, throughout a number of cosmologies, no matter where they are on the face of the globe, or even separated by time and distance. You know, they all seem to be kind of singing off this same proverbial shamanic hymn sheet with regards to how to reach higher realms of consciousness, maybe meet God, or maybe meet yourself, or find out what's after this great adventure we call life, or what came before, you know. And I find that truly fascinating, because if I'm completely honest with you guys, growing up, as I say, sort of in the 80s and 90s, and obviously I love my parents to bits, but my dad had the overriding opinion that wasn't drilled into me, but it was one that I kind of grabbed hold of it, I guess, and run away with, that when we die, it's kind of fade to black. There's nothing else. You're a pile of bones, and that's it. Game over. I hope you enjoyed the ride. And no disrespect to my dad, because again, he's been an absolute soldier and sort of championing my research. He's always got ears, and he's even bringing a lot of ideas into the arena, you know, possible avenues of research. I'm forever thankful for that particular hero's journey, the number one hero of my life anyway. But yeah, just becoming sort of privy to the DMT experience. It was when I released The Spirit in the Sky, I had a number of people on podcasts or direct messages via the online media outlets that we have these days, and wanting to know basically what was my experience like. You know, how did I feel after having
that's what I was going to ask. So
well, to be fair, I wasn't going to lie to these people. You know, I said, look, with all due respect, it's something that I haven't tried. It's something that I'm looking forward to trying one day. But yeah, I haven't got that kind of proverbial t-shirt. So I might be talking the talk, but I hadn't at the time, loose air quotes again, walked that proverbial walk, if you know what I mean. And there's kind of a mythology behind it, where people say kind of DMT will find you when you're ready. You know, you might think you're ready, and yeah, for a couple of years, damn, I thought I was ready, you know, but it wasn't until I was penning deity methamphetamines that the opportunity actually kind of arrived. I won't go into it too much, but I'm thankful for how that did arrive. And yeah, with the greatest respect, it's the most powerful, most surreal, most worldview shattering, most terrifying, and outwardly existentially amazing experience that I've ever had in my life. And to try and compartmentalize a DMT experience into a handful of sentences, it's nigh on impossible. You know, it really isn't. I don't think we've got the brain power, the ocular capacity, the language barrier, or anything to actually justify sticking down in maybe 1 or 2 or 3 sentences exactly what this experience looks like or feels like, let's say.
I had a client when I was working in mental health who would paint his experience, and he's an interesting guy, but he had a pretty vivid like memory of geometrical patterns that he would paint over and over again, and they were so complex. And I would be looking at it, he'd show them to me, and I'd be like, I don't know, this is so complex. He's like, this is like a fraction of what I saw, and this is the best I can do to describe it. And I was like, okay. Personally, I've never done it. I've always been like a little like scared, like of what's on the other side of the veil. And people do say it's terrifying. So I'm gonna do what you did and wait till it finds me and not go find it myself.
I know, and it will find you. It will find you. I'm absolutely certain about that. And I mean, at the end of the day, we do produce it endogenously. It's like it's nobody knows whereabouts in the brain or the body. I think we're starting to get a little bit closer. You've got the mythology about the pineal gland. It's definitely in the pineal gland, but whether it's produced as well as secreted from the pineal gland, nobody really knows. But we know it's there, if you know what I mean. Yeah, but there's more than enough toolkit within the human brain and chemical and biological makeup of the human body to actually produce it. And it wouldn't surprise me if some people that have these, I guess, Kundalini or out of body experiences, in my opinion, I think they might be creating more endogenous DMT than kind of the everyday Joes like ourselves that are just handling through life and trying to wait for this DMT to arrive, if you know what I mean. But I genuinely do believe that there are people out there that have had this endogenous burst where it's literally, just cascaded past or through the blood-brain barrier, where they've had this proverbial, loose air quotes again, awakening or what have you.
Yeah, yeah, because people often relate that to the dying experience. Do you?
Well, the latest research at the moment, and I can't remember the names on the papers, although a lot of the research I still believe is coming out of Greenwich University in the UK, excuse me, where they're doing the DMTX trials, where they're intravenously giving these guys more than just an 8-minute proverbial trip into outer space.
Yeah. Is that what Andrew Gallimore, is he involved with that? I've heard his name.
Yeah. It's I think it was Andrew Gallimore and Dr. Rick Strassman systematically kind of, I guess, built this hypothesis and the machinery and the dynamics in order to actually be able to do this. And some of the stories that I've heard from some of the people that have actually taken part as well are just almost unfathomable, you know.
Is there long-term effects of being under there for that long, being extended DMT experience? I wonder if they're reporting any sort of long-term issues, or have you heard of that?
Not that I'm aware of, but again, I'm not going to sort of quote on what I don't know, if you know what I mean.
Right.
But some of the testimonials of some of these people that have been in the DMT state in excess of maybe even a couple of hours, which to me, I mean, for 8 minutes, man, that's enough, because Yeah, I mean, I've only done it a handful of times, and to me, that's enough. That's enough, you know. I've kind of pierced the veil. I've had a little look, and I'm like, man, okay, the door's open ajar. I'm not sure if I want to kind of take a giant stride through there at the moment, because you guys are saying that's 8 minutes. I came out of this experience thinking, what year is it, man?
Right. And Graham Hancock himself, like pushed the envelope far enough where he had a terrible experience. I don't know if that's how he described it, but experience that was quite scary, and that actually made him quit smoking weed and changing his lifestyle for about 15 years. Did you have any, like, after you're, doing DMT first couple times, any sort of life-changing epiphanies or anything?
And it's just, it's a good word. We'll get to epiphany later on as well, because we can broach that very quickly now. An epiphany being a burst of divine inspiration from within the midst of one's mind's eye. But the scientific name for the pineal gland is epiphysis cerebri as well, which is where we get the word epiphany from. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's all kind of loose etymological connotations with regards to some of these biblical scriptures, with thine eye being single and thy body will be full of light. And we know that the pineal gland is the light receptor of the body as well. So someone somewhere a long time ago kind of worked a lot of this stuff out, and they're kind of given us breadcrumbs to kind of pick up, if you know what I mean, or even puzzle pieces to make that proverbial bigger picture, you know. But with regards to lasting effects, I wouldn't say correctly. If anything, I'm in awe of the possibilities of what my existence may entail when it's not kind of fade to black.
Nice.
Because I'm fairly certain that this is just what you're seeing right now is kind of the best projection of what my spiritual higher self would like the world to kind of see, if that makes any sense. I think that my body's just kind of a vehicle for whoever's driving the hard drive, if that makes any sense. When we have thoughts in our minds and we kind of go back and forth, I mean, what is the voice in our mind? You know, is that us talking, or are we listening to something? Or, I mean, personally, I think the Hancock and McKenna analogy, whereby we might be perceived more as the proverbial transistor radio that's tuned into a frequency where consciousness can maybe even enter and thus exit the body when the body, I guess, kind of gives up the ghosts.
Right.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating subject, but it's something that I'm not advocating saying go out there and do DMT. That's not what I'm saying. Trust me. The first time that I actually done it, I knew that I had sort of 30 or 40 minutes before my son's mum was going to bring my son home from nursery. Excuse me. And I found myself thinking, well, I've had this in my possession for kind of 6 months now, and I haven't had the kahunas to do it, but maybe now's the right time. And I was the guy that didn't take the advice from everyone that said to me, make sure you've got a wingman, make sure you've got someone just to make sure that you're not going to freak out, hold your hand, put a hand on your head and just say, dude, you're breathing, don't worry, everything's fine. I didn't have that guy. And yeah, like an idiot, I actually inhaled a couple of tokes on a pipe with changa, which is DMT infused root bark, from which DMT is actually extracted from. And I wasn't actually aware that might actually take a little bit longer than a normal free-based DMT inhalation to actually have that proverbial breakthrough, as it were. So I've taken sort of 2 or 3 hits of this changa and thought, okay, I can feel something. Maybe it's bad changa. I don't know. So like the idiot that I was, I went for the free-based DMT as well. And they say take sort of 3 really large, if you can, inhalations, and kind of the rest will be history to you. As far as I'm aware, I think I only got about two hits in, and then kind of the Changa really crept up. And for want of a better description, they were kind of pixelated entities that were streaming or cascading through my window, literally right in my face, almost going through me. But they were laughing at me. They were like, dude, you want to see it? Oh, you've done it this time, man. You shouldn't be doing it like this, but get ready, because you're going to need a seatbelt. Strap yourself down, because there's no way back. There's no way back. And it was terrifying. It really was. I literally felt my existence pouring away or streaming out of the back of my head. And the last thing I remember prior to having the experience was thinking, oh shit, I'm going to be the first guy to make the paper ODing on DMT, and my girlfriend's going to come back with my newborn son, and I'm going to be dead on the balcony. You know, it scared the absolutely bejesus out of me. It really, really did. So, yeah, I'm saying don't take this stuff lightly, because it really puts the frighteners on you before you actually kind of pierce the veil, as it were.
For sure. What was it about that moment where you had it for 6 months and you were like, all right, now's the time?
40 minutes? How come? Yeah, after 6 months, all of a sudden 40 minutes was plenty of time to go through the Milky Way and back. I don't know.
Yeah, as I say, I had it in my possession for the best part of 6 months, and I had it loaded. I had it ready to go. But there was something within me, I guess, that wasn't ready, which is why I kind of advocate the argument for when you're ready, you will know, if you know what I mean. And don't get me wrong, when it did kind of land in my location, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to be doing this tonight. I can't wait. I'm going to do this, and the weekend I'm going to do this, and then I then found myself kind of backing off and making excuses not to do it. You know, I was like, oh man, when am I going to do this? And I just kind of I pigeonholed it for, as I say, sort of 6 months, until I guess the time was right. And the rest, I guess, is history.
Amazing.
I can't believe that 30 minutes till home time was enough. I would have waited for a 3-day weekend, I think.
Well, I was just going by the accounts of even good friends of mine, like Dick Carno. If you heard of Dick's work on DMT and my occult mind, I'll put you guys in touch with him. He's writing book 3 or 4 now, I think.
What was the name?
As well, Dick Carn. I'll send you a link to his work. I'll send you a link to his work. Perfect. To remind me. But yeah, he put a Vice magazine article together, and it wasn't his title or framing of the particular interview of what they'd done with him, but they loosely framed it. I'd done DMT 600 times in 1 year.
Whoa. That's like breakfast and dinner.
Yeah, that's just crazy. That's seriously crazy. I mean, just wow. But what you'll find from Dick's research as well, it's not so much just a breakthrough experience, it's the sub-breakthrough threshold that he was more interested in, and the dynamics of what he believes these DMT entities may or may not be. Because there's a lot of people that think that when you have that proverbial flash and disappear into this otherworldly, indescribable, multi-dimensional realm of existence with all these sentient entities that are saying, dude, welcome back, XYZ, that's probably going to be the furthest part of the cosmos that we know, that you've just been jettisoned out of your body and you're literally the other side of the universe. But I think there's a lot to digest and take seriously regarding Dick's work as well, because he's kind of the opinion that maybe this DMT realm or threshold is actually something that is invisible to us, but it's with us on a daily basis, but we just don't have the optic capacity in which to perceive what might be in front of us. Like, for example, the electromagnetic spectrum, for light, or indeed visible light.
Sure.
The percentage of visible light on that spectrum of 100% is 0.0035%. So we're
Right.
talking about 1/300th of a percent is what we actually testify to claim in three-dimensional reality. The rest is who knows, who knows.
You could say that about all our senses too, right? We just have very poor measuring tools for reality, and so that's what was that? What did you call that? The sub what threshold? The sub
Sub breakthrough.
Sub breakthrough threshold. Can you explain that?
It's quite hard, really, unless you're kind of privy to the experience.
Sure.
But with the greatest respect, and I'll try not to butcher this, the experience goes: you have one hit, okay, I can feel something. Two, damn, my visual perception is starting to change. Something's definitely going down here. And number three is kind of whoosh, boom, you're gone. Where? Who knows?
Okay.
But prior to having these, I guess, world famous three hits, you have just the one or maybe two, the which is like a sub breakthrough threshold. It's
Okay.
where it's very, very hard to describe. And Dick is extremely eloquent in his books where he's describing his experiments back to back, and it's almost like the oxygen's been kind of sucked out of the room, and everything has kind of crystalline clarity. There's no more sort of scuffs on the wall or deviations in the carpet or the tiles or the brickwork or what have you, and everything just becomes like super, super HD around you, and you start to feel or even hear. I think there's a lot to say for the tinnitus experience as well. I've suffered from tinnitus quite a lot when I was younger, when I was growing up, and they said it's something you are going to grow out of. Don't worry about it. But I remember having one, overriding experience when I was in a classroom. I must have been about 13 or 14 years of age. And this tinnitus was ramped up and amped up so intense in the center of my brain, basically where my pineal gland is. And it was almost like I had a couple of like F-15 fighter jets, like literally turning the ignition and ramped up right next to me. And I felt as if there was an overbearing weight that was being pushed down from above me. And I'm in class at the time, and I'm looking around, and I'm literally thinking, what is going on? And I'm saying, can you hear this? Can you hear this? And the people are looking at me like, oh man, Rick's freaking out. What's wrong with Rick, man? He's losing his mind. And I'm like, no, guys, can you not hear this? And they said, no. And I realized it was my tinnitus, but I had the overriding feeling that there was something monstrously huge above the school, albeit in the clouds, that was imposing itself on me. And I didn't have the capacity to actually get up from my chair and leave my desk and look out the window, because the noise and the feeling was kind of terrifying, to be fair. I actually thought my head was going to explode. But it's something that I think that is, in my mind, is intricately related to the DMT experience, because most, if not everyone, will tell you will hear this, I guess, tinnitus sound that will start off kind of like a low pitch frequency that will then amp up in intensity and get louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. And you genuinely think that your head's going to explode. But at that moment when you think, man, my body can't take anymore, it's almost like coming through an airlock, from one pressure zone to another, like from and I can only liken my tinnitus experience to the DMT experience, because, as I say, when I was privy, first of all, to having these sub-breakthrough or threshold DMT breakthrough experiences, there was an overriding sense of familiarity, like, oh, that's the that's the same noise, you know.
Oh, wow.
Oh, is this linked? You know, I mean, who knows? I might have been producing more endogenous DMT at a young age more than my peers, if you know what I mean. But don't get me wrong, I was like the freak of the class, you know. Oh, Rick's losing his mind again. He can hear. He thinks there's a UFO above us or whatever, you know. But I had that on a number of occasions until one day, like the doctor said, it literally just stopped. I mean, I suffer now and again from DMT, from tinnitus when I come out of like a concert or something like that. But it's what everyone gets, you know. But I'm just, when I do hear it, it's very, very reminiscent of, I guess, that initial blast off or ignition from a DMT burst, let's say.
Got it. And so there's sort of a space between like here and then the DMT realm, and that's the sub breakthrough area that you're talking about. That the one hit, the two hits, and and then once you get the third one, then there's no going back. That's it.
No going back. No going back. And as I say, when I felt that what was essentially every essence of my being melting into, I guess, the framework or the tile work of what I was lying on my balcony, well, it was terrifying, but there was part of me where I can explicitly remember my head kind of lolling to the side when I was thinking, damn, I'm actually dying, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I looked at the wall, and it was almost like the wall was looking at me going, dude, we're the same thing. What are you talking about? You ain't seen nothing yet. And that was kind of comforting, kind of reassuring, because I didn't have that trip sitter, that wingman sort of just holding my hand and just going, dude, you're fine. You know, you're fine. Because I did not feel fine. I did not feel fine.
You had the wall, at least. The wall was with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the wall was my wingman, you know.
The wall wasn't expecting to go to outer space when I woke up that morning either, but the universe found it. You brought it along with it.
It was crazy. It was crazy. And in fairness, ever since I've had that first initial experience, and I've only had sort of 2 or 3 since, not that I didn't have love for, I guess, my fellow human being and animals and insects and this, that, and the other. But yeah, I don't break branches or anything. It's really, I don't know. It's for something to be so illicitly off. Oh, yeah, I mean, out of bounds. Don't go there. We're not allowed to have it. If you get caught carrying DMT, you have 20 years in prison. It's bad. You don't want to touch this. It's like, dude, man, seriously. It's kind of, not that I was ill, but I think it genuinely has the potential to cure ills, you know? I'm not saying it is for everyone, don't get me wrong, but I've definitely got more of a sense of a love for, almost sounds crazy, but inanimate objects might not be as inanimate as we actually think they may or may not be, if that makes any sense.
It does. I don't know why I was born like this, but I've been, as a child, I vividly remember being 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, and like having this overwhelming and overpowering feeling that the stuff around me was like had feelings. It could feel and was aware of me, and that I was aware of it. And so when my parents would try to throw stuff away or give stuff away, I would just be like totally heartbroken. This is my parents just always thought it was like, hey, you're just a kid, you'll grow out of it. And to a degree I have as an adult, but I still feel that in my environment right now. And I don't think I do believe that there is some, like, we're all connected to something. The only times I've ever been able to sort of manifest that, you know, feeling on my own without, say, mushrooms will do it sometimes, is through, like, so for example, if I'm like in my running days, when I'd be running at like 5 a.m, I'm on like mile 12, and something happens in my brain where, like, it's a lot like you described, where everything becomes way more vivid, almost like being on mushrooms. I feel way more connected. Like my body feels part of the ground. It feels part of the moon and the stars. Like I'm like in the zone, but like that is like, must be, I know you're kind of laughing because like that must be
I'm smiling. I get it.
Okay. It just feels like probably a minuscule slice of what it's like to take the third hit of the DMT, right?
So if you take that feeling and amp it up, I mean, just untold amounts, you know. I mean, I think Joe Rogan kind of hit the nail on his head, and I'll probably butcher the quote, but it's in the same kind of ballpark where he says, it's we all know, we've all heard of aliens, we've all heard of mushrooms, but this is mushrooms times a million plus aliens, and you're still not even there, you know. And that's literally how it feels, because it's so hard to categorize, and just to kind of put into context within a number of sentences, you know, because I don't think that our language is evolved enough to actually do it any justice.
In those moments is where I've had my best epiphanies. And so I guess to my next question, how did your experiences of DMT like affect your writing and connecting what you were doing in your first book to your next few books? And, you know, I'm sure you were going to go through that with us anyway, but.
Yeah, sure. We'll kick off with some of the presentation and bits and pieces in a moment.
Let's throw on the slides.
I don't know if I could attribute it to my DMT experience or not, but it wasn't a churn or anything putting this particular book out there, the Spirit in the Sky, but I found being privy to the DMT space when I was writing or compiling Deities, Myth, and Tryptamines, I found it a lot easier. Not even easier. I found it quite strange. There was an element of time dilation sometimes where I'd know where I'd want my writing for a particular chapter to end up, and then lead into what I wanted to start the next chapter with. But I was finding it a little hard at times in the Spirit in the Sky to kind of get down what I needed to get down. But after my initial DMT experience, whether it's linked or not, I don't know. But writing, I guess the muse became a little bit more alert in me. Because I'm certain that there were times where if I started writing maybe 8, 9 o'clock in the morning with a nice strong cup of coffee, there were times where I'd only kind of take pause and step back from my laptop and sort of thinking, oh, I've got to stretch my legs now. Crikey, I'm starving. What's the time? Oh my God, it's 2 o'clock. I'd be sitting for like writing for 4 or 5 hours without even realizing where the time had gone. And it's stranger still, I would genuinely read back some of these chapters that I ambled together over a period of 4 or 5 hours, and I'm reading it back thinking, damn, this is a good book. Who is this guy, man? Where did this come from? You know what I mean? It was very, very surreal. It was very, very surreal. There was definitely an element of almost not even recognizing my own words, if that makes any sense.
That's what Rogan describes when he's talking about what's that book he's always referring to, the War of Art, and Conjuring the Muse. And when you get to that spot, you know, some writers have spend their whole they'll spend a whole ritual just trying to get into that zone where that you were in, where it's like it's just flowing. You're just the vessel. It's coming and it's coming through your fingers, and you're just the vessel. Yeah. So, do you still have issues finding that space, or?
No. If anything, it's finding the time to create that space. Really. Right. What if my move back down from Yorkshire over the past few months, and then starting this new job, and just the relocation and kind of getting my bearings and getting comfortable where I am again. It's nice to be back home, back down on the coast. I've always felt kind of drawn to the sea. Excuse me. And it's usually the best place for me where I can find that proverbial muse, I guess, because there's no other place in my mind's eye where I can see the night sky in all its brilliance without the light pollution of the lights of London and Leeds and what have you. You know, the lights are behind the downs behind me, and I'll just take pause. And sounds a little bit crazy sometimes, but I will talk to my favorite constellation, Orion, and rather profoundly, it's I found that it's spoken back. It's kind of crazy.
I don't think that's crazy at all, and I do the same thing.
Well, when I first came across this molecular structure of DMT after watching this spirit molecule documentary, I had an overriding sense of enthusiasm about what I'd just learned from Rogan and Strassman, but I also felt an overriding familiarity with this chemical structure that I'd only become privy to kind of half an hour before, you know. And I couldn't pin it down. I couldn't place it in my mind's eye where I thought I'd seen this before. Why was it so familiar to me? And it was when I was down on the beach that I literally was trying to take pause for thought and think, man, where have I seen this? Where have I seen this? It's such a familiar compound structure to me, and I don't know why. And it was like that epiphany that we were talking about. You know, the clouds literally just moved aside, and there was Orion, and the entire back catalogue of ancient Egyptian mythology and everything I kind of became privy to in the years before reading about this mythology of Osiris. It kind of hit me like that ice water challenge, you know, with a bucket of water people were doing around COVID bits and pieces. I literally felt like someone had just gone, bam, that is Osiris, and I get it. I think, what, this can't be true. But everything kind of started to fall into place, which is where I would like to start getting down to some of these images here. But thank you for the quote, Graham. As the consciousness revolution unfolds, a complex web of patterns, connections, and influences in the human story are being revealed. R.N. Voogt's research reintroduces us to omnipresent Osiris, the divinity immanent in humanity, which are quite powerful words. So let's get into the myth of Osiris, shall we?
Right on.
Here's where it's going to start getting a little more interesting, apart from me waffling on about my psychedelic experiences. So, the myth of Osiris. It starts where Osiris has been invited by his wicked or evil or dark or chaotic brother Seth or Set to a banquet. And during this banquet, Seth actually says to all of his guests that he's got a beautifully ornate coffer that whoever it befits the most perfect can in fact keep this particular casket. And it appeared to be an absolute marvel, and everybody obviously wanted to take this home. And they were all trying it out. They were all lying down inside this casket, but just like the story of Cinderella with regards to putting on the glass slipper, people are either too fat, too slim, too short, too tall, until, of course, the turn of Osiris. And Osiris lays down inside the casket, and it fits him perfectly. It's literally made to measure. But to the guests' stunned amazement, Seth and his men decide to put a lid on the coffin whilst Osiris is lying inside. They fasten the coffer and they swiftly hurry it down to the banks of the Nile, where they toss Osiris stuck in this casket into the Nile, whereby the casket is floating around for a number of days and nights until it eventually runs aground in modern day Lebanon, known at the time as Byblos. And it's actually, in fact, just diverging, Byblos is where we actually get the name Bible, because that's where the first pressings of the papyrus are actually had the Bible written on them, which is kind of, I think there's kind of an ironic take there as well. And it makes me wonder, when they were pressing these particular reeds, whether there might have been some kind of ayahuasca type analog going on with regards to this particular resurrection process that we're going to get into in a minute. But what happened when Osiris's casket runs aground in Byblos is that it actually runs into a tamarisk tree. We find that a tamarisk tree is actually of the acacia variety. And over time, this acacia tree starts to grow around this casket, further entombing Osiris in his grave. Excuse me. But this tamarisk tree was a special tree. It was so beautiful and so resplendent that the king of Byblos, it says, wanted it to be felled so it could be carved into an ornate pillar that was going to hang inside his palace and adorn the walls of his palace, which he duly done. And we find that Osiris's wife, consort, sister, albeit, got wind of this, and she decided to actually try and bargain with the king of Byblos to try and set Osiris free, to which he actually agreed to her terms. And Osiris was rescued from his untimely grave, which already sounds to me like an extraction process, whereby when Osiris was considered, when he was locked inside this casket, it was a wooden casket again, but within this tamarisk tree, albeit the acacia, he was actually immortalized and became synonymous with the lifeblood or the sap of the acacia, which is extremely interesting, which we'll get back to in a second. He'd now been rescued by his wife Isis, and this enraged his brother. And his brother, he didn't like this and decided to dispatch of Osiris once and for all. So he actually murdered him for a second time, and disbanded his body parts all across the Nile Valley, which were all gathered up by his wife Isis to try and, I guess, proverbially resurrect Osiris by his missing phallus. Excuse me, but when he was murdered again, they say that he basically ascended to the heavens and became the macrocosmic namesake of the constellation of Orion, which is extremely interesting. Because we find a couple of conflicting mythologies here. Either Osiris is going to be remembered forever as the lifeblood of the acacia, albeit the sap of the acacia, or indeed he's going to be resurrected and forever immortalized as a macrocosmic namesake of a constellation of Orion. But what I believe is going on here is something a little bit more profound, because what does this really tell us? I'm just gonna.
Can I ask a quick question? So if we want to take this myth at surface level, they were trying to come up with a good story for how Orion got up there in the clouds, and that's the surface level version of that myth. That's his spirit went up there, and that's why they're shaped like that.
Absolutely. Okay. And I'm crikey.
We like to go deeper than that on this show, but just to get everybody on the same page, let's take the
no, for sure. So what we find on the right hand side here, you can see the constellation of Orion, albeit Osiris, and just to the left of the constellation, we've got the two-dimensional reconstruction of the DMT molecule, which I still find quite striking, just as it is, whereby the bow that you see there with the NH molecule is basically, a rendition of ammonia. It's the amines part of the molecular makeup of DMT. And when we actually transcribe this into the simplest form of the amines, we actually get ammonia, which would then become the proverbial bow, which I'm actually going to highlight just there with the cursor, which I find extremely interesting as well. Mm-hmm. But this is, we touched on before, where my readers would actually contact me in direct messages. There was some wonderful ideas. There was some, there were some pretty nasty comments as well, which I kind of compartmentalized and put to one side. But there were also comments where people were saying to me that in order for my hypothesis to be correct, the reason they don't think I'm correct is because the bottom half of the constellation of Orion is more of a trapezium as opposed to the 5-point hexagonal indole benzene ring, which is how it's described in molecular structure of DMT, which again, my hands were up. I said, yep, granted, you've got me. That's not a problem. I can see that. And that's a fabulous argument. But again, that was kind of a push through the next threshold with where this particular mythology started to lead me. Because we find that the myth of Osiris is actually, he becomes personified as, here we go. He's also synonymous with a hare-headed deity known as Wenet, also known as Unetha, which is, also known as Osiris. But Osiris only becomes synonymous with this hare-headed deity when he's assimilated aboard what is known as the cosmic barge. And the cosmic barge also goes by another archaic name in ancient Egypt, and it's known as the Neshmet. And the reason they were describing the Neshmet is because it's we have what's known as the mysteries of Abydos, which they still celebrate today in ancient Egypt, whereby we see Osiris taking or setting board or taking the cosmic barge across the Nile, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And Egyptologists will talk about the Osiris having green skin, which we'll get to later on in the conversation, about it being the Nile being replenished on the seasons, tides of the Nile. The vegetation is thereby replenished in the spring, XYZ. And that's I'm sure that's obviously what nature tells us, But we find that a lot of Egyptian mythology and hieroglyphics are also multifaceted. It's got more than one meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Which I found extremely, extremely interesting and eye-opening, because if we decide to then look at this hypothesized trapezium or indeed hexagonal indole benzene ring of the DMT molecule.
There's the answer. Just look further down because I was counting dots too, and I said, all right, 5 versus 6 is pretty close, but there they are. Right there.
Yeah. So literally following the proverbial dots in the sky as the mythology is intended, what we actually find beneath the constellation of Orion, albeit Osiris, we actually find another not so well known, but it's there on the night sky. If I look out my window now, she's there. This particular constellation is, believe it or not, is a rabbit. It's a hare. And what we find is extremely intriguing when we start to join the dots with regards to the rabbit's head. So if we follow the mythology as intended and we decide to ask Osiris to set foot aboard the proverbial Neshmet in the sky, albeit throughout the rabbit's head, Lepus, we call it today. Back in the day, it was known as Wenet. But we have two extremely bright stars in the constellation of Wenet in the rabbit's head. The first one is Alpha Leporis, known back then was Arneb. And the second brightest star is called Mu Leporis. And the ancient Egyptians, believe it or not, called it the Neshmet. So if we decide to ask Osiris to literally, here's my cursor, if we ask him to literally set foot aboard the Neshmet, we then join them proverbial dots in the sky via the rabbit's head, albeit Osiris assimilated as Wenet or Unetha. We then create the complete indole benzene ring for DMT reflected upon the macrocosm. But even more astounding, which is where how many kind of coincidences does it take until we actually maybe start to envisage something profound is actually being kind of dictated to us here? We find that there's another star within the rabbit's head in that particular constellation, which is we call today is Beta Leporis, but the ancients knew it as Nile. And it was across the Nile aboard the Neshmet where Osiris was meant to be taking his journey. And what we find is that Nile is not spelt the traditional way, N-I-L-E, it's N-I-H-A-L, which, believe it or not, is an ancient Sanskrit name. And that Sanskrit name is associated with joyfulness, happiness, and well-being. And this is where it gets a little bit crazy. What we find, if we then join the proverbial dots again as intended,
No shit.
we then find serotonin in the sky, and we find that science tells us that serotonin is an essential neurotransmitter which is secreted by the pineal gland from within the midst of one's mind's eye, which is necessary to create the overriding feeling of joyfulness and well-being within the human experience. So either I'm a little bit crazy, or something rather profound may or may not be happening here.
So I just wanted to say I'm a human, so I recognize patterns and I see them, but I'm sitting here going, wow, like it's hard for me to DMT inside us but also as I guess it's the as of above so below thing, right?
100%.
That's the only way I can explain it.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the constellation of Orion or Osiris is a macrocosmic molecule in the sky. I'm not saying that whatsoever.
Sure.
What I am saying is that this particular star cluster, albeit star clusters, excuse me, of Orion, Lepus, and Sirius, which we'll get to in a moment, they're in fixed positions, and rather remarkably, if not ironically, if not coincidentally, they appear to match a two-dimensional rendition of the molecular structure of DMT. And it's my hypothesis is that someone somewhere lost to the historical narrative was privy enough to understand what the molecular structure of both DMT, serotonin, and psilocybin, which we'll get to in a moment. And they've actually used basically nature's television, the stars in the sky. I mean, we amble around in the 21st century with all these neon lights and on our phones and not paying any heed or attention to what's going on above us. But 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, go back as far as you like. There's no highway lights, there's no bright city lights, there's certainly no mobile phones, which is why stories were made in the sky. And yeah, what a wonderful story the myth of Osiris appears to be. So what happens if we decide to marry Osiris with his wife Isis in the sky? So I will literally just ad-lib from the screen that I've got here, because like Osiris is actually connected, considered to be a gatekeeper to the other world. Isis, we know, is a goddess of fertility. She's also a goddess of life, a healer of the sick, which is important, and a keeper of a myriad of 1,000 magical incantations, which can be extremely revealing. Because Isis, we find out, is further synonymous with Sirius and Venus because of their extraordinary luminescence. Now, history has it that they were thence named Phosphorus and Lucifer, which we know today as the light bringer. Phosphorus, we find, is an essential chemical compound vital to the production of proteins needed for bone growth in the human body. So basically, without it, we simply wouldn't exist. So what happens if we decide to marry Osiris with his wife Isis in the sky? Something rather magical indeed happens, because psilocybin, or loose air quotes again, magic mushrooms, appear to be emblazoned upon the sky as well, albeit the molecular structure thereof. And rather astoundingly, the one simple molecule that transmutes DMT into psilocybin is phosphorus. So if we marry Osiris with his wife known as Venus, the light bringer, and the namesake phosphorus in the sky, we then find psilocybin in the sky, which I find extremely mind-blowing, to say the least. And all we're doing is following a mythology and joining those proverbial dots in the sky.
Yep.
But to further compound this as well, we also find that once Osiris has assimilated as Wenet via the rabbit's head, albeit Lepus, which we call it today, excuse me, and he's actually set foot upon the Neshmet, he becomes assimilated once again as the overriding father of the gods, known as Sahu. But Sahu has a number of other namesakes as well, which become extremely revealing. As I say, he's known as the father of the gods. He's also known as the hidden one. We know that DMT is hidden within the acacia, if not the night sky. He's also known as the incorruptible soul. And anyone that's privy enough to have a DMT experience, like I was talking about earlier, as opposed to fade to black, you're a box of bones, that's it, thank you for the lifetime, move along. I think most people would be kind of in agreement, or would give a psycho or spiritual nod in the direction of maybe there's more to this life, or indeed afterlife, than meets the proverbial eye. So incorruptible soul has a lot of connotations with the DMT experience itself. It's also known as the beautiful renewal. And again, Egyptologists would refer to the renewing of the lush vegetation of the Nile Valley during the spring and what have you. But science would say it would agree. It would also like to inform the world and his wife, as it were, if not Osiris and his wife, that DMT actually is guilty of renewing damaged neurological pathways within the human brain, which is extremely, extremely profound. And again, if it's something that was maybe worked upon, like we were saying, 40, 30, 50 years ago, it makes you wonder where modern medicine would be today with things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and what have you. If we do have the capacity via an endogenous chemical compound that we create in the brain, if we boost that endogenous production via an external source, the possibilities are mind-blowing with regards to the I guess the afflicted not being so not downtrodden. What's the word I'm looking for? Just afflicted with such a terrible illness, that we're still trying to put our finger on and try and work out how to correct in the modern era. And maybe the ancient Egyptians had worked this out, because quite clearly, in my mind's eye anyway, they've given us the keys to understanding where DMT is located, how we can extract it, what it looks like, what the advantages of doing this are. And again, for all intents and purposes, we find that Osiris is the original god of resurrection. And as anyone would probably tell you as well, with regards to having this proverbial DMT breakthrough space, as I was saying, I genuinely thought that I was dying, I think 99.9% recurrent of people that have actually had this particular experience will probably sign the same testimony saying, yep, I felt like I was dying. And science will tell you as well that DMT will literally trick the brain into a death-like state of mind before you having this overriding download of cosmic wonderment, for want of a better description, whereby you come back from the experience and you literally feel resurrected. You have new eyes in which to experience this wonderful experience we call life. It's almost as if your consciousness has had that Mario mushroom, and just kind of leveled up a little bit. You've just got a little bit smarter, a little bit more savvy and privy to what the world may or may not be around you. So with regards to resurrection, I think that's what might actually be going on. Because what we find is a number of extremely famous granite statues or busts depicting Ramesses, excuse me, the pharaoh Ramesses being blessed by the earthly embodiment of the spirit of Osiris by an anthropomorphic deity known as Horus and Set, Horus being the son of Osiris. Now, legend has it, the Horus, he has a victorious battle with Set when the sun rises, and he would see Set actually banished to the underworld until the sun sets again. Set, however, would defeat his nemesis and overthrow Horus thereafter and rule over the pervading darkness of the Nile Valley until the sun rises again. And like I quote here in Deities, Myth and Triptychs, we actually considered Osiris his otherwise bizarre headdress alongside the photoreceptors of the human eye and the pineal gland. And if I'm correct in positing this particular hypothesis, would it not make more sense to envisage Horus as a metaphor for serotonin, which is secreted during the daytime, whereby Set would then become a natural contender for the for this neurotransmitter's chemical counterpart, melatonin, which is literally secreted via the pineal gland during the hours of darkness? To me, the allegory is extremely clear. And like you can see at the bottom of the image here, this rather ill-fitting conical headdress marries up extremely well alongside the photoreceptors of the human eye and the pineal gland. The green skin is accounted for by the photoreceptor cone alignment, whereby the green photoreceptor is actually the chief or number one photoreceptor, whereby this is how we cross-pollinate these particular bands to get the electromagnetic spectrum in everyday waking reality. But to further, in fact, just before we go down there, just to further sort of kind of hammer this home, we actually find, and I think I have a picture of the particular sandstone stela here somewhere. Sorry about this. We might have to revisit this again on another on another conversation, because it does go so deep and so long. We could be talking for hours. But what we find is the oldest sandstone stela depicting the name of Osiris, which actually has an acacia tree growing out the top of this mound of Osiris. And the hieroglyphics itself that you can actually see here, where we have a throne and we have an eye and we have the deity there holding the Ankh key, which is also known as life or a lifeblood in itself. That actually, if I get back up to where we were, that makes a lot more sense with regards to the hypothesis I'm bringing forward with regards to the iconography of Osiris's, as I say, ill-fitting conical hat and his green skin being likened to a photoreceptor of the human eye, because the hieroglyphics literally translate as seat of perception, which I find absolutely mind-blowing. And it's hard to kind of argue against, if you know what I mean. It's not like I've cobbled together a story and made up my own connotations, if you know what I mean. I'm literally, picking up them proverbial puzzle pieces to make a bit more of a clearer picture for people like ourselves in the 21st century. And I think it makes a lot more sense than the, excuse the pun, Egypt illogical ideal or narrative that I like pumping.
That's what I wanted to ask was what does Zahi Hawass I don't know if you've asked him, but like a typical Egyptologist, big Egyptology or big art, what do they say about this?
Honestly, I have absolutely no idea. Anyone that I've tried to engage with just likes to say, you've heard the word pseudoscience, right?
Sure, yeah. I think it's a badge of honor in these days.
There's also pseudo skeptics. If you go around defending one point of view and never listening to any others and call yourself a skeptic, that's a pseudo skeptic.
It's crazy, right? It's absolutely crazy. Again, all I'm doing is pointing out a mythology and kind of, like I say, and I'll keep repeating myself, but following them proverbial breadcrumbs, and joining the dots as I believe they were meant to be intended. I think what I'm I'm hypothesizing or postulating holds a lot more water than anthropomorphic deities walking around with
And people that were simply
heads or
obsessed
aardvark heads or
memorizing.
elephant heads in Sanskrit. You know, I mean, the
Yeah.
elephant heads is a wonderful one as well, and I think I've actually got an image here as well. You might be privy to this particular information as well. But I'll literally just bring up a quick bust of, I don't know if you can see this. Oh, we've got Jesus crucified first of all alongside the brainstem. We can get into that conversation either on this podcast or at a later date if you wish, but it all plays in. Can you see that?
Yeah.
And then we have a bust of Osiris alongside the brainstem as well.
Uh-huh.
And underneath we have the Hindu deity Ganesh alongside a posterior view as the human brain. And Ganesh himself is actually known as the god of wisdom and intellect, which brain connotations abound. Or again, there might have been an elephant-headed dude walking around ancient India a few thousand years ago. I mean, who knows?
Well, I like how you're trying to fit the puzzle pieces together. And so far, you're not really having to reach too far out. We're all on topic here about neurotransmitters and hormones within the human mind. And so it's not like we're going too far out here. It makes kind of more sense than that there was this ancient culture that had all these fictitious mythological tales that people were just obsessed with repeating and memorizing and learning. I think that's kind of the surface level analysis that you get. That to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. No,
I don't think it does. I mean, I feel a bit more enriched on this level of understanding as opposed to the narrative. I think it's an outdated narrative now, you know. And I'm not saying all of Egyptology is worth throwing away. There's a lot we owe to it, you know. But I think a lot of it needs to be brought into the 21st century with 21st century thinking minds, you know, because a lot of them are still churning out the same kind of lectures that they were giving almost 100 years ago, you know, since Tutankhamun was discovered in 1920 or 22, whenever it was, you know.
Yeah, they need to be more open to multidisciplinary research too, because it seems to be the biggest issue is somebody comes in from a different discipline and says, "Hey, I see it differently," and they get shunned.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I have conversations with people online. Sometimes it gets a little bit out of hand. Sometimes there's name calling, which isn't really nice. And I kind of draw a line under that particular conversation and move along.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, I can't understand why these arguments are put forward without having a decent argument. You know, again, I'm quite happy putting my hands in the air saying, man, okay, I might be wrong. But until I have that conversation with someone that actually wants to sit down and kind of dissect this properly, as I think it should be dissected, it's just name calling out the window, really. But yeah, just before we wind it up, I'm just going to give you a couple of bullet points why I think this was more of a global understanding and not just something that was going on in the Nile Valley. As per what obviously the Hancocks of the world are saying, there must have been some kind of global understanding. We've got pictures here of the Menkura pyramid and its casing stones, which again, are kind of a little bit ill-fitting considering the rest of the Giza plateau. But we actually find the same casing stones almost half the world away in Sacsayhuaman in Peru. But we find the Menkura pyramid is actually thought to be dedicated to Horus, the falcon god, son of Osiris. And rather remarkably, Sacsayhuaman in Peru translates as the place of the satisfied falcon. Excuse me. I'm going to come a little bit further down here. There we go. Right. So if we draw, let's say, an imaginary line from the corner of the Menkura pyramid to Göbekli Tepe, which we will touch on very briefly in a moment. The distance from Göbekli Tepe to the Menkura pyramid is 1,080 miles, which is the radius of the moon. And if you like to get yourselves on Google Earth as well and take a measurement from Göbekli Tepe all the way to Sacsayhuaman, we actually find out that it's 7,920 miles, which is the diameter of the Earth, which may or may not be coincidental, but I think it's going to start holding a lot more water when we look at, it's going to bypass some of this. This is other trees of life and, excuse me, other pre-Columbian artifacts and the deities which appear to be extremely frequent with DMT entities. Okay, right. So you're familiar with the Great Pyramid and the height of the Great Pyramid being multiplied by 43,200 being equal to the polar radius of the Earth. And a lot of people say, oh, it's kind of arbitrary. It's just a random number, this, that, and the other. But yeah, there's reason that I think there's reason to kind of think again. You're obviously privy to the latitude of the Great Pyramid of 29.xyz north, appearing to reflect the speed of light traveling in a vacuum of 299,792,458 meters per second. Okay, everyone's privy to that. But they say, well, what about the longitudinal coordinates? This is why it must just be coincidence and arbitrary. But again, if we look at the longitude of 31.134667 east, if we divide that by 360, again, theorizing, they know the size of the globe, and we're talking about obviously a spherical shape here. If we divide it by 360, it's equal to 0.0864. And the diameter of the sun is approximately 864,000 miles across. Again, it might be a coincidence, but if we decide to draw a circle in meters around the base of the Great Pyramid, excuse me, and we subtract a circle drawn inside the base pyramid, it comes out extremely close to, if not equal to, the speed of light. And again, I mentioned this in Deities, Myth, and Triptymines, but the Bible's first 3 days of creation are at verses 5, 8, and 13, which are part of the Fibonacci sequence, which is also known as the Golden Ratio. And the height of the Great Pyramid once stood at 5,813 inches, no less. And a circle with a radius of 5,813 inches has a circumference of 36,524 inches. And yeah, it's not hard to work out that there's 365.24 days in a solar year. So we keep getting these connotations towards the size of the planet and our place in the cosmos according to the dimensions of the sun and the notion of light. But what I would like to bring attention to as well is Göbekli Tepe. And it's been brought to my attention over the past few years by the research of the likes of Freddie Silver and co. That Göbekli Tepe actually has an ancient Armenian namesake, which is Portasar. And Portasar, excuse me, Göbekli Tepe itself, it translates as the pot-bellied hill. But Portasar, we find, is actually translates as the umbilical of Osiris. And in southern Egypt, excuse me, in Abydos, there's a place that obviously you guys are going to be privy with as well, that wouldn't actually look out of place should you actually show people photos of some of the constructions we find in Tiahuanaco in Bolivia. And it's typically dated to around 1250 BC, and many to believe it, including myself, believe it to be far older, due in part to it lying well below the bedrock of Seti I temple, which has been constructed adjacent to it. And again, for no apparent reason. But like I say, it wouldn't look out of place in Tiahuanaco in Bolivia. And Aku, the suffix at the end of that compound word is actually an ancient Egyptian word meaning light. Tiahuanaco translates as the people of light, or my people of light, which is rather intriguing as well. But unlike most or all Egyptian temple constructions, the Assyrian is completely lacking in inscriptions except for the geometrically precise glyphs of I think there's 2 of them, of the flower of life. And the flower of life, crikey, it's what I see and what a number of people I've spoken to and would testify to seeing on one of these threshold or sub-breakthrough DMT experiences, where instead of the world kind of pixelating before your eyes, it's almost like these geometric flower of life starts to kind of materialize before, I guess, the world around you starts to disappear. Excuse me, which is kind of striking. But staying with some of these measurements and anomalies regarding these geographic locations of these particular destinations, I found it extremely intriguing when I hit up Google Earth once again and asked myself, what happens if we draw a line between the two single most iconic Osiris identifiable locations, being Göbekli Tepe, albeit Porta Sar, and the Assyrian? So what we find is a location. Right, so the distance between Göbekli Tepe or Porta Sar is 864 miles. And as I've just transposed as well, that the sun's diameter is 864,000 miles. Now, the midpoint between the Assyrian and the umbilical of Osiris or Porta Sar, excuse me, Göbekli Tepe, is precisely 432 miles. And it lies directly above the biblical city of Jerusalem, less than a mile away from the fabled Temple Mount and the Dome of the Rock. It's the Dome of the Rock, excuse me, which was built upon the so-called foundation stone, which is sacred to both Jews and Muslims. And we won't go into what's going on over there at the moment, but I think we all understand the connotations therein. Mm-hmm. But Islamic belief actually dictated as the location whereby the Prophet Muhammad had his ascension to heaven. And it's also the same place where Jesus was meant to be, he had his transfiguration from Christ into the light. And in Jewish tradition, actually considers that particular location as the navel of the world, or where creation on Earth actually began. And I find it extremely ironic, whereby we're tying our metaphorical umbilical of Osiris to the navel itself. Which I find extremely profound and eye-opening. Like I say, the cartouche. The cartouche has Osiris's name in there, but I find this extremely interesting as well. Is that we have the same hill or mound of creation. The Jews and the Muslims are talking about in association or accordance with ancient Egyptian mythology and the Mound of Osiris, whereby this tree of acacia, albeit the seat of perception, actually sprung forth from. Excuse me. But rather intriguingly, again, we find a connotations towards light, because Temple Mount or the Dome of Rock is also known as Luz, and Luz translates, believe it or not, as light. And it's also the same location where the fabled Jacob had his meeting with God and wrestled with God, saw the face of God and survived. And guess what? He called that place Peniel, and the Peniel is the light receptor of the human body. Mm-hmm. And just to kind of compound this a little further before yourselves and your listeners get bored of me droning on, we've got another macrocosmic coincidence whereby the pre-Islamic deity Aluza, like Osiris, like Isis herself, is actually associated with the planet Venus, but she's also known as a goddess of vegetation and the mighty one. Excuse me, and the goddess of vegetation. We also know that DMT is pretty much littered, if not flooded, throughout plant life and animal life throughout the globe. And she's a goddess that's central to the ancient anomaly we know as Petra. And even more profound and striking, Aluza has two sisters. So there's three of them, and they became synonymous with, believe it or not, Orion's belt and the constellation of Orion. And it's actually said that the only way you can meet Aluza, the goddess of vegetation, the mighty one, is actually by manifesting from the acacia. So again, we have an as above, so below. Again, the connotations just kind of they just go on and on and on. It becomes biblical after a while, because we find that the Ark of the Covenant was actually built from wood, and that wood is described in the Bible as shittim, and shittim is a variety of acacia. And why did they construct the Ark of the Covenant? They wanted to speak to God. Mm-hmm. again, I might be shooting completely in the wrong direction. But I think when you have a number of coincidences and compounded with another plethora of coincidences, I think we've got to kind of sit up a little bit straighter and maybe read between these lines and say, do you know what? Someone somewhere might have worked some of this out and been ingenious enough to stitch together a profound mythology for future generations of humanity to kind of, again, read between those lines again. Yeah, dare I say it? Meet God, meet yourself. Yeah,
Putting
it's
puzzle
profound.
pieces together.
Absolutely, absolutely, and my research continues. Again, I'd love to wax lyrical continuing this particular myth, but until I've actually published my next book, which is loosely titled Entheogens in Antiquity, there's more to this particular myth than actually meets the eye, and it keeps blowing my socks off the deeper it gets. I think someone can work this out.
We're talking about layers of coincidences at the microscopic level that coincide with, stuff at the earth realm level, to the cosmic level, to the spiritual. There's coincidences all through that. That doesn't sound like a coincidence anymore.
Well, I'm glad you agree. I mean, there's people out there that would disagree with me. And as I say, I've got no problem just you can run with it or run away from it. I'm happy either way. But I genuinely feel in my soul that my understanding of Egyptology and mythology has become so much more enriched, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course, because you're looking at it through several different lenses versus just like here's what the Egyptologist told me.
Absolutely.
And
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not a religious man. I never was a religious man, but I've definitely swung from one side of the argument to another, whereby understanding or trying to verbalize the DMT experience that I have had, I feel extremely enriched having an understanding somewhere deep inside me, whereby I think this is just like a whistle stop tour of my existence. Just when this body's gone, like we said earlier on, I think there is something next.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is something to these proverbial resurrections, let's say, whereby again DMT tricks the brain into a death-like state, and then you kind of come back from this overwhelming spiritual profound experience with new eyes, resurrected, in which to kind of view the world again. I know my worldview is completely shattered, and again, I'm not poo-pooing any religions or anything like that. But again, we have Jesus, and I'll be very quick here as well before we wind it up. Jesus is the God of resurrection. But the original God of resurrection, again, 5,000 years or so before, was Osiris. And I'm not cherry picking mythologies and sections of the Bible to kind of fit my narrative, if that makes sense. Because just like Osiris, Jesus was known as the light, or the light of the world. And he says, if there's light, if thine eye be single, then your body will be full of light. But Jesus was also known as the Amen. Yeah. And Amen is synonymous with our moon. And our moon is the Egyptian solar deity, and is a ram. He has horns. And those horns we actually find in the human hippocampus. And that hippocampus is actually known as Amun's horn, which I find absolutely mind-blowing, really. We have a myth of Pegasus with regards to the flying horse. We've all seen the likes of Clash of the Titans and things with Pegasus.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, and Perseus slaying the Gorgons and the Titans and whatever. I've never seen a flying horse. What can it mean? What can it mean? But we find out the mythology behind Pegasus. Pegasus was born of a union between Medusa and Poseidon. We find that Poseidon is a god of the sea, and he's a god of horses. So does that make Pegasus a seahorse? It might do. Um, and a seahorse, if I just bring up a very, very quick image for you here, we find that
Well, that might be your most controversial take yet. Everybody knows it's that big white horse that comes on at the beginning of the movies.
absolutely, absolutely. But what we have here is the seahorse and the hippocampus. And the hippocampus actually translates as seahorse.
Oh, wow. It almost looks like an ear as well.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. But we actually have, that's actually known as Amun's horn as well.
Mhm.
And Amun being synonymous with the Amen. But the myth of Pegasus, it continues though, because crikey, it's said that it's the hoof of, if you see, Justin, where's my finger? I'm going to try and find this. There we are. Just
Got the
there.
whole page.
Did you see that?
Yep.
It actually looks like a hoof. Now, it's actually said in mythology that it's Pegasus's hoof that kicked open the fountain of Hippocrene in order for memories to flow, which is why Pegasus became synonymous with Mnemosyne. And Mnemosyne is the goddess of memory. And what is the hippocampus? It's the memory bank or the memory vault of the human brain, which I find absolutely intriguing. Again, we might be wrong.
So that sounds like a clue
A flying horse, right?
in the hierarchy of primates. When that hippocampus gets activated, all of a sudden you can abstract and store memories, abstract the past and file it, categorize it, memorize it. Then you got a new species that can start making culture, making civilization.
Absolutely. And within the hippocampus itself, it's flooded with the enzymes, if not the tools, to create endogenous DMT. I mean, if DMT is responsible for maybe what we're seeing in this proverbial epiphany or the mind's eye or in dreams, yeah, who's saying it's not responsible for revealing memories, that are stored within the hippocampus. And again, I don't want to go too deep into that as well, because I might be exposing sort of some of my next publication in that. But I find this whole hypothesis absolutely fascinating. And again, like I say, it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone, but I've certainly found my life feels a little bit more enriched because, like I say, until someone takes me to see a flying horse or the like, or an elephant-headed deity or a hawk-headed deity, it's going to be quite hard to sway me. But in the meantime, I'm just enjoying studying, reading books, meeting people, having fun conversations with people like yourself.
Yeah.
And putting this information out there, guys.
Well, we really appreciate it. I had just, I guess, one kind of wrap-up question with, all these, I'm not going to call them coincidences anymore. I'm going to call them parallels, but with these geographical parallels and cosmic parallels, biological parallels, quantum parallels, I'm not asking you if you have the answer to life and everything, but
no.
Like if you were to, on your bingo card, do you have like aliens, lost ancient civilization, God, like who's responsible? If you were to have a bingo card.
Considering I spend so many nights, as I say, down on the beach, looking up at the stars and constantly wondering who's looking back. I mean, crikey, the stars that we can see, man, they're just on Orion's spur within one arm of the Milky Way. And it's like someone spilt the sugar pot, and it's just stars everywhere. That's just one galaxy. There's trillions of galaxies, and that's just a sliver or a fraction of what we've found that's out there at the moment. We're just the James Webb Telescope is starting to open up so many different angles of what the cosmos may be or may not be. I mean, for all we know, we could be living inside one giant organism. I mean, you look at I think it's called the Laniakea Highway, super highway in space. It's like a cluster of not just stars but galaxies. And if you look at that against the neurological connections and synapses that fire off in the human brain, I mean, you would be able to tell which one was which. You know, it's absolutely fascinating. And I'm not saying that is what's happening, but why not? But to think that we're alone in the cosmos and that we haven't been visited, we won't get visited. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a parallel that's like literally at the highest cosmic perspective to the lowest, and there's literally they look exactly the same, right?
Yeah,
so,
and we find ourselves in the midway point of everything. You know, I was saying on a podcast the other night. Crikey, solid matter, for instance, everything's infinite. You know, no matter if you have a solid object and you keep cutting it in half, cut it in half, cut it, no matter how small, no matter how microscopic on a quantum level you get to, you still have a hole that needs to be cut in half again and cut in half again. So everyone is infinite.
Would I be out of place by saying we exist at the navel of experience? Like we're right in the middle, right?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, you look at the Vitruvian Man. If that square in the circle around the Vitruvian Man is the universe, we're the belly button. We're right in the middle. You know, it's crazy. And who knows how far inwards that goes from the navel, you know, because we're only starting to understand now the subatomic realms of quantum technology and what have you. And yeah, it'd be for another podcast. Maybe get the likes of Laird Scranton talking to you guys about the cosmology of the Dogon, because right now, crikey, some of their pictoglyphs and what have you, they would not look out of place on a physicist whiteboard or an astrophysicist whiteboard, because they appear to be leaps and bounds ahead of what we know today.
And I forgot, I was going to ask about the Dogon people. It's something on my list of things to investigate. I remember you talked about it at the end of the show. We'll have to talk about that on a whole nother episode.
Oh, 100%. I would, I can put you in contact if I can with Laird Scranton. I mean,
we would really appreciate that.
11th or 12th book at the moment, Science of the Dogon. And yeah, wow. Crikey. He's probably one of my, if not my favorite alternative researcher. And yeah, I would do Laird an absolute injustice by talking about his research, because I wouldn't butcher it, but if you want to hear it from the horse's mouth, man, that guy will blow your socks off.
If you could connect us, that'd be awesome. And I feel like I have 5,000 questions for you. I just want to end with just one. You already mentioned you mentioned it a couple times. Is there any hint or anything you can give us about the next book, or what you want to share about that? Little.
Okay. Crikey. Right, there's
without giving anything away.
You got close a couple times already.
There's a lot of ancient symbology connected to both the myth of Osiris and Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica, and the symbology is all too clearly related to what we know as modern day Freemasons and potentially the Philosopher's Stone. So
very cool. Well, I'm really excited for that book to come out, and it's been really. When is the book coming out, by the way? Do you have any?
As long as work goes okay, and I don't get too distracted at the moment, just with life in general, I'm hoping to get it out there for the upcoming summer solstice, because a lot of this is to do with light as well, and I think it would be kind of apt if I can kind of press that publish button sometime around the 21st of June. So
we got to get you at Cosmic Summit this year, my man.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm ready to go. I'm just waiting for invitations for conferences and bits and pieces. And as it stands, I think a lot of people might be a little bit wary of some of the things I talk about. Hence, there's been no official invites.
Not at Cosmic Summit.
It is what it is. I'm quite happy.
You'd be welcome at Cosmic Summit. I'm going to start that tonight on X. Let's bring our envoy to Cosmic Summit. So
yeah, make it all happen. Let's get this stuff out there.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure, gentlemen, and thank you for your time.
It's been a blast. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, hope to have you again. So because we got more questions.
Absolutely. We'll definitely do it again. Just for your listeners, thank you for the inspiration. If you're not privy to the work, my books are found on only Amazon at the moment. I'm actually in the middle of constructing a website. I've got a number of articles on grahamhancock.com. And I'm found literally by typing my name into YouTube. I've got a YouTube channel.
We'll put
BOOGHT is a strength. Excuse me.
Oh, I was gonna say we'll put Amazon book links in the
Highly
description.
appreciate that, guys. Fantastic. And any merch, we got some random t-shirts too.
Very cool. And you're also active on X, so you can interact with Mr. Vooght on X as well.
That's it. If you don't mind a pun or two, right?
I don't.
We like them.
All right. Good night, my friend.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Take care.